Good evening and welcome everyone to this League of Women Voters Rochester special presentation and discussion with Rochester Mayor Kim Norton, Olmsted County Commissioner David Senjem, and Cate Stacy, member of Rochester-Olmsted Youth Council and senior at Mayo High School. My name is Anna Froling, president of LWV Rochester, and I will be moderating this evening's discussion. How green can we be? Our guest speakers will be giving us an update of what is happening locally to encourage sustainability and green energy use, as well as the current status of projects and initiatives and where we go from here. I want to thank LWV members for organizing this event. LWV is a volunteer organization active at the local, state, and national level to encourage citizens to vote and participate in government. Core issue. The League believes that climate change is a serious threat facing our nation and our planet. This issue is one of LWVMN's Minnesota's priorities for 2023. Just a little bit of housekeeping. Following the presentation, we will have time for questions. Please enter your questions through the Zoom chat box. LWV members will be monitoring questions and passing them on to me to ask during the last part of the program. We're going to have Cate Stacy go first, and she has to leave, so we will, if you have any questions for Cate Stacy, put those in the chat box right away during her initial presentation. And encouraged to turn cameras on. And to avoid distractions, attendees' microphones will remain muted. Open the chat box to ask questions, find additional information, and links to information. So we will get started. And now I would like to turn the program over to our first speaker. We are delighted to have Cate Stacy as chairperson of Rochester-Olmsted Youth Commission Environmental Committee. Cate introduced the idea of a green business recognition program. Cate will describe the program, and she will name recent winners, I believe. Cate also served in a sustainability internship position at the City of Rochester in 2022, where she designed a web page and database to share the Green Business Recognition Program. She also published a monthly green business newsletter and promotes recycling options in city parks. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Cate Stacy, and we'll go ahead and have you give your presentation.
Great, thank you so much. Okay, so I'm Cate Stacy. I'm a senior at Mayo High School, and I'm going to be talking about the Green Business Recognition Program, which is an initiative the Youth Commission started last fall. So a little bit about the program's goals and why we wanted to create this initiative. So first off, we wanted to recognize environmentally conscious local businesses. We wanted to encourage community members to prioritize sustainability in their spending decisions, also help Rochester meet its sustainability goals, and lead Minnesota in actively addressing climate change. So for the program's origins, I pitched the idea to the Rochester-Olmsted Youth Commission in September of 2021, and there was a lot of good feedback, and we decided it was something we wanted to continue with as a project. So we started drafting an application, and we had help from Lauren Jensen, the city sustainability coordinator, and she helped us create the criteria for the application, and we finalized it around December. And then we began with some outreach in February. So I presented to the Chamber of Commerce and Rochester Downtown Alliance, and we just wanted to kind of kickstart the program and kind of gauge interest for participation. And then in March, we actually started recruiting businesses. So lots of emails and other things, but the most effective way was definitely just going door to door visiting businesses, handing them an application, explaining why this program is important for our community, and encouraging them to participate. So we visited over 40 businesses. And then in June of 2022, we closed the application wave. And by that time, we had gotten 13 participants, and they were awarded with bronze, silver, or gold recognition. So a little more in depth about the actual application. So it's a self-evaluation. Businesses fill out a form and they check off the practices that they've taken within their daily operations. And so these practices are divided into 7 categories. They include solid waste prevention, recycling, purchasing and materials, energy and landscaping and water conservation, involving employees and customers in green practices, and transportation. And there's about 10 or so actions in each category, and businesses are required to check off at least one action in each category. And then each of those actions have a point value of 1 to 3, depending on their difficulty to implement and expenses. And then the number of total points determines bronze, silver, or gold recognition. And then in order to receive silver or gold recognition, participation in the City of Rochester's energy benchmarking program is also a requirement. And then in order to encourage that businesses keep striving to be more sustainable, we ask that they identify 3 actions they're planning to work towards in the coming year. So why should businesses participate? Well, being more sustainable will help to reduce operating and utility costs. It also attracts new customers who are willing to pay higher prices for environmental quality and are looking to support sustainable businesses. And then also to be a leader in our community by making better choices for our planet. So in 2022, we awarded 13 businesses with recognition, and they received a decal, as you saw on the last slide, to display in their storefronts. So for bronze recognition, we had Old Abe, Janky Gear, Fiddlehead, Olmsted Medical Center, the Reading Center / Dyslexia Institute of Minnesota, Cafe Steam, Treatum, and Christie's Studio. And for silver, we had Central Bark, Beneke Construction, Sergeant's Gardens, and Family Service Rochester. And then for gold, we had Mayo Clinic. And then also started in this fall is a newsletter. And this monthly newsletter features a different green business each month. And it just highlights what the business is and what actions they've taken to be more sustainable. And then if they would like to, some of the businesses offer a discount, such as Fiddlehead. They offered like $1 off a coffee for subscribers. And then also a sustainability tip of the month. And this has ranged from like how to eat a more environmentally friendly diet to energy use and other things. And then the goal of this newsletter was just to increase community awareness of green businesses and just encourage more interaction between the community and these businesses that are doing some great work. And then here are just some photos of, there's the Earth Fest Expo last April, and then 3 of our business owners that have been really great to work with in spearheading the program. So if there's any questions, I'm happy to answer those.
I'm going to unmute myself. And I see one comment in the chat from Mary Gorfine, who is the Olmsted Rochester Youth Commission leader. And she said, I cannot begin to tell everyone how proud Rochester Olmsted Youth Commission were of Cate and her leadership on this project. So I have a question. Good. I have a question, can't let you go without. I like practical, kind of tangible ideas. So tell me one idea or one thing that a business is doing in town that you thought was remarkably interesting.
Well, let's see. I know Family Service Rochester, they installed solar panels on one of their buildings, and then I think they are looking to do that at their second location. And then I also really like a lot of the coffee shops. So there's several that we've recognized, like Old Abe's, Cafe Steam, Fiddlehead. A lot of them participate in like a composting program for coffee grounds. And coffee grounds are really good for composting. And so I think that's a really neat initiative, and especially to see like multiple of the businesses coming together to do that.
And then a question in the chat is how to get the newsletter.
So I can actually go back. There's a QR code down in the corner. And if you scan that with your phone, it'll just go to a landing page, and then you type your email in, and that'll sign you up. So it's very affordable in emails and whatnot.
Perfect. Thank you. I am sending that to myself right now because I don't have time to fill it out, but I got it, and I will do that later because that will be good. And I don't know if I saw any other questions in, and then one other question, because I can't let you go without a couple of questions. Self-reporting. Why did you decide to go with self-reporting versus like another avenue on that?
Well, the biggest thing was that we were all, busy high schoolers and don't really have the capabilities to go in and like evaluate a business, or like city staff that were able to kind of take on that role. So we decided that like a very thorough self-evaluation would kind of be the best way. And that way businesses could kind of fill it out on their own time, see what they're doing. Some of them like who don't own the building had to, contact people. So it was just more for ease and practical.
Good. I also think there's an educational aspect for the businesses just from filling out the form too. I think that's a good idea. So thank you for doing that. And I understand you may leave early, but thank you for coming. And I'm going to go on to the next portion of the presentation, and that's to our next speaker. We have Kim Norton, Rochester, and thank you, Kate, very much for coming and sharing that. We have Kim Norton, Rochester's mayor, and she's in her second term, and she's also a former Minnesota representative who will update us on the city's adoption of publicly devised set of sustainability goals and a more climate protective agenda. She will also share some of the big projects the city is working on. So I'm going to turn it over to Mayor Kim Norton. There we go.
Am I unmuted now? Okay. So thanks so much for the opportunity to share a little bit about the city's goals, and then you'll get to hear from David Senjem, and he'll tell you a little bit, I think, a more broader context and a little bit about what the county's doing. So hopefully between the youth approach, the city and the county, you will come away with a pretty good understanding of what's happening in the community. So the first slide I'm going to show you here is kind of generic. And this is a list of the United Nations Sustainability and Development Goals. The goal of this 17 Sustainable Development Goals from the United Nations is to end poverty, protect the planet, and ensure prosperity for all. And a lot of what's happening around the country really stems from this approach that the United Nations took, and youth and countries and people from all over the world have adopted some or all of these goals. And in fact, in my office, I had these little squares up on my wall to remind me the work we're going to do. And you can see it's quite encompassing. And so, as you've heard already from the wonderful presentation that Cate did, our young people in this community don't need to be convinced that sustainability is an issue. They are convinced and are part of the voice that the city has used in moving forward. So what you'll see here is a slide about what we're doing in our community. We want to create a sustainable and resilient community. It started some time ago when Mayor Brady was the mayor of Rochester, and I actually served on the Energy Commission as a community member. We had an energy action plan that was adopted, and it really was all really focused on energy, renewables, energy adoption, and carbon reduction. And it's a great plan, but there's more to creating that resilient, sustainable community than just energy. And so we'll talk a little bit about the direction the city is going, but one of the things that you will see is that there was a joint city and community group that gathered. There were, I think it was a larger group to start with. I think there were about 45 people that were there regularly, and they met for a year. And they talked about all the aspects, and you see them down there, of what it would take to create that sustainable and resilient Rochester. So this group of citizens gathered, talked, worked for a year, worked with a consulting firm that the city hired, and did a lot of hard work in all those areas. And really what the city is trying to do is create a culture, not just one or two things, but a real culture. And it talks about the triple bottom line. We talk about that a lot. And historically, you would see communities focusing on the environment or the economy, but they would often forget the social equity component and environmental justice. And so this really, the culture we're trying to build in our city is one that thinks of the triple bottom line in all decision-making. And what you'll see here is just a few examples that were recently given to the city council about how you have to look at all three in some of the decisions that we're making. And so we know that the work in the community is integrated, and it needs to be. And so policy and future actions that the city takes will be talking regularly about this triple bottom line, which is a newer term. I hope you'll hear it regularly from the city council. That sustainability and resiliency committee I mentioned, these are the issues that they identified. Climate change resilience, creating a city for health, having vibrant neighborhoods, accessible transportation, resilient economy, and environmental health. And that group worked very hard using those United Nations sustainability goals that I mentioned, as well as the city's comprehensive plan to develop 101 tactics that are under 34 major strategies. About half of these are things we have to do as a city, and the other half are things that have to happen in the community. And so we're going to rely on the community to hold hands, take our hand, and together move forward with creating that sustainable and resilient community. It can't be done by one or the other. And I would argue, and I think Dave would probably agree, that the county the city resides in the county, and that the county, by embracing these goals, can help us move further faster. So it's a really exciting time in the community. And here are just a couple of the things. It's not going to be comprehensive here today, but a couple of the things that we've started with, excuse me. So in order to make the changes that we need to in our community, there are three areas we have to really focus on. Certainly one of them is development and land use. And so as a city, a lot of the work that we do probably feels kind of boring to the general public at large, but we do a lot of work in the area of development. And so we really have focused as a city, starting a number of years ago, on moving towards more density. And looking at the growth, because we're a rapidly growing community, how can we look at where infrastructure currently exists and or has already been laid out in the plans and make sure that our development is in parts of town that are already developed or in areas in the community. And if you had noticed earlier this year, the city council identified a section of town northwest that growth is to occur next in. So it's not that development can't occur elsewhere, but when we move outside kind of the city that you think about where houses are, the next areas are going to be very specific to help us manage our growth and be more sustainable and resilient in doing so. The other thing we have to think about is transportation, which is, again, one of buildings and transportation are two of the worst items, if you will, in our community for greenhouse gas emissions and issues we have to address with our sustainability and resiliency plan. So the city council, I say we, the city adopted a unified development code, which says how the city is going to grow, and also an active transportation plan that creates a more bikeable, walkable community that is transit oriented. So our growth, you will see, is going to be really focused on developing where transit is. And we also have to be very careful in those developments that we make sure we're not developing where so that we create unhealthy neighborhoods. And I can tell you there are parts of town who will tell you that a lot of buses mean a lot of noise pollution, a lot of unclean air. And so as we move forward, we have to think about that in our transportation plans. How can we have clean buses that are electric, that do not produce along a transit-oriented development, unhealthy lifestyles and homes and housing for people? So there's a lot that intersects here. And that last one on the left side there is our energy use goals. So again, and I'll talk a little bit more about this in a minute, but as we move from an energy committee, a commission, citizen commission, to a sustainability and resiliency commission, this is, we're not abandoning energy. It's just going to be more comprehensive, the committee itself will. So here we have RPU has already pledged to go 100% renewable by 2030. That was a huge move, and the city council adopted that goal. And we also have improved our greenhouse gas emission goals as a city. It was voted on just a couple months ago that we're going to be 50%, a 50% reduction from, I think, the 2017 year by 2030, and 100% reduction based on 2017 by 2050. So we are really moving ahead aggressively, and there was actually discussion. Should we be moving ahead this aggressively? And we decided that we needed to set really high goals and fall short if we have to, rather than set low goals and not really move the city in the direction that we need to. On the right side are just a couple other issues that I wanted to mention that have happened this past year or so, which is we've retro-commissioned the retro-commissioning of City Hall. We're moving off steam. We have been on shared steam heat and cooling from the county, which maybe Dave will address and maybe not. I haven't seen his presentation. But we are moving to geothermal, which is a low temperature heating and cooling for City Hall. And I am very hopeful, and some of us talked about this before the meeting started, that we can take advantage of the huge amount of money available through the state and through the federal government on energy in order to create an entire district, which was our goal a year ago. But because there wasn't a bonding bill last year at the state legislature, we had to move ahead with this geothermal for the city, or we would have no heat or cooling in the building. So we moved ahead aggressively anyway, but we're hoping to really now be able to ask the state and the federal government for some support in order to move a district. So it would be the library, Mayo Civic Center, City Hall, and then private entities that, as some of you may know, there's open land there and a new development going to be coming in where the Wells Fargo Bank building is. And those could all hook up to this system, and it would create an entire clean energy district in downtown Rochester. So the county already has its steam for a portion of the city, and we would have a geothermal for another portion of the city. So it's pretty exciting. We also 100% LED street lights. That was a project we started a couple years ago. And one thing I didn't really mention is our relationship, and I think it's on another slide, but a relationship with the German city of Munster that Dave and I have been involved with for many years. We told them that that would be a project we would complete, and it didn't get done in the year we promised, but it did get done in a subsequent year, and we now have LED lights all throughout the city. We also are having temperature guidelines set in our city-owned buildings. We have a city manager position that was filled for buildings. We have never had a facility manager in the city of Rochester. And as some of you may know, businesses like Mayo Clinic and other governmental entities that have many buildings often have a manager. We have added one. And we created an Office of Sustainability that Lauren Jensen, who I know presented to you guys at one point. We have her now as a full-time staff, and she's doing marvelous work. So just a couple other things as I get ready to close here. We do have the relationship with Munster, and that's going to continue. It's not as active with the visits as it was in the past, but the relationship continues virtually, just like we are here tonight, monthly or bi-monthly through the University of Minnesota's connections. And Dave and I both participate in those when we can. We also are working on benchmarking, and you heard Cate talk about it in her presentation about the business awards, that in order to be gold or silver, you had to do benchmarking. We have been doing benchmarking for, I think this is going to be our 4th year. It's voluntary. We have about 145 or more businesses in the community who voluntarily benchmark. And what that means is they fill out forms and share information about their own energy use per square foot. The city then helps them compare themselves to other businesses of like businesses to see, are you being energy efficient or not energy efficient? And then we'll give you ideas and help the business become more energy efficient. Many of the businesses, just by filling out the form, had no idea how much energy they were using. And just by filling out the form and looking at the data, they have an average of a 1 to 3% less expensive energy and usage moving ahead just by filling out the form. That's not even by making any changes. So it is really helpful. And the city council last week was asked to consider making that a requirement of buildings over 20,000 square feet. And there was some pushback from some of the city council members, but we'll see how that goes moving ahead. Also, as I mentioned before, our Energy Commission is switching. And one of the reasons, as I mentioned, those 104 goals that the Sustainability and Resiliency Committee identified, we need somebody who can take that on and have ownership to it and help us move that forward into the community. And that will be one of their tasks. We are seeing a huge increase in solar adoption by members of the city. And I think that will only pick up because the feds are offering funds for people to help them, and RPU does as well. So we're going to see that pick up, and it's picked up exponentially in the last 3 years. Also, the VMT, you may not be familiar with that. That's vehicle miles traveled. The state of Minnesota is actually looking at that, as is the city of Rochester. How can we get people to take fewer trips? And there are many, many ideas out there that'll be rolling out in future years. How can we utilize walking, biking? And in Rochester, we're going to be doing BRT, bus rapid transit, which should really help cut down the number of buses on the road and increase people's use. It will be free. We'll start out west of town at what will be a transit village, but some of you are familiar with Mayo's parking lot out there, west on 2nd Street. It will start there. It will go all the way into the Civic Center and over toward the fairgrounds. So that will be a bus rapid transit line that anyone can ride for free. And that we just found out we got some money in President Biden's budget. And that bodes very well because and we got a high mark on our grant. So that really tells us that the federal government is going to fund that, and most of the funding will come from the federal government, but this city and DMC have a role as well. One thing that I wanted to mention that the city and county could cooperate on, because cooperation and collaboration are key to doing this, is on garbage hauling. I know the county has done some things recently, but one of the things that the Energy Commission years ago found is that if you can do garbage hauling either by district or by a single contract, you can cut the number of garbage trucks running around the city, because there are many companies that do it and they all drive up and down the same streets every day. You can significantly impact greenhouse gases. And actually the cities that do it, there's a lot of fighting. People don't often say, no, I don't want this. They're afraid their services will get worse, when in fact the contracts assure that they get better and they can often be done cheaper. So this is something the city was on the cusp of doing 3 years ago, backed off. And maybe the city and county can have some discussions about that moving ahead. And then we're working with developers to create greener buildings, green rooftops, solar roofs, parks on roofs, and really focus. And I think for the city council's benefit, we really need to focus on cost savings. Some of the city council members, the triple bottom line is fine, and they're not opposed to that, but they want to make sure this is cost savings for people if we're going to move in that direction. So my last slide is really just the Earth Fest Expo. Little information for you. The Earth Fest will take place. Earth Day is on April 22nd, 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. at Norton Community Center. There are going to be, this is a change. It's been out at RCTC. It's going to be moving to Northrop, and there'll be vendors and all sorts of information, classes you can take that week. You know, keep an eye out for it. And then there's some activities that are spotlighted on the right side. There's a trivia, and there's a tour of the waste to energy facility, and a bike ride. And I would encourage you all to participate in that. And then there's a film and Q&A with the director on April 18th. So these are just some ideas, but the Earth Fest website has lots more information on it, and I'd be happy to provide that for anyone interested. So that's what I had.
Thank you, Kim. And I am going to go on to our next speaker, and I have to find, I lost it. Sorry. There we go. For our third speaker, we have Dave Senjem, recently elected as an Olmsted County Commissioner and former chair of the Senate Energy Committee. He will discuss green initiatives in Olmsted County, as well as provide information on state and international clean energy progress. So I'm going to turn it over to David Senjem. And I think we'll get your slides up there in just a second.
Okay, there we are.
Okay.
All right, all ready? Okay, thank you so much for the opportunity to do this tonight. It's really exciting as I was sitting here watching, and Cate and certainly the mayor, outstanding presentations, very interesting. It's kind of funny, you live in the same community, and we don't even as public officials, sometimes we don't know what the other hand is doing, so to speak. So from my perspective, that was all very good, no question about it. Yeah, I've had a chance to kind of work this energy spectrum for quite a long time. Actually, when I first went in the Senate in the early 2000s, I was a member of the Senate Energy Committee for a while. I had to defer to somebody else for a few years, and then got back, I don't know, the last 7 or 8 years. But my epiphany relative to the whole energy, I'll call it sphere, was basically came about starting about 2011, when I had a chance to go to Germany on an energy policy exchange, and then subsequently several times more with Dr. Sabina Engel from the University of Minnesota. And through that experience, I came from a position of being fairly skeptical about this, kind of spending all my working life at Mayo Clinic, where reliability with respect to electricity was just sacred. I mean, you just could not afford anything other than constant electricity without blips or anything. And then thinking about the whole issue of moving away from baseload power, as we call it, going to something renewable, I was pretty skeptical. But it took me about 3 years, and I realized that this can be done. It's all about science. It's all about technology. And since that time, I have continued to sort of ride this path, if you will, of a clean energy transition going forward. And probably for me, at least personally, as I considered this county board position, I don't know, several months ago, it was for me to have this opportunity to continue to be interested and involved in the energy sphere, not only in Olmsted County, but my plan is in counties across Minnesota, working with the Minnesota Association of Counties and so on to again keep the hum alive, so to speak, on this whole thing. So we're here tonight to talk a little bit about how green can we be, and the answer, as we see on the next slide, we'll have to flip it. It really depends on how green we want to be, and if we want to go to the next slide, I'm just going to say next, if we can. Where we are now, and that might be kind of important to the point of asking this question in terms of where we are. There's some polling done by the Minnesota Conservative Energy Forum, and that's basically, honestly, quite frankly, a Republican-orientated organization that works within the Republican sphere to promote a clean energy future. And they've done some recent polling. This is of August of last year, 600 people across Minnesota. 80% of the voters agree on supporting an all of the above energy strategy. And basically what that means is all forms of energy except coal. So that's pretty strong. If you just kind of divide that 80% up, 38% strongly agree, 42% somewhat agree, and then 14 or the remaining 20% down there disagree. So it's an 80-20 ratio with respect to where people are in terms of thinking about the energy future. And if we can go to the next one, basically, as we think about the political persuasion there, it's 45% Democrat, 38% Republican, 16% other. And that's only to say that people, I think, normally almost talk about the energy and the clean energy future as a democratic idea and push, but when you get people on the telephone and talk to them privately, a good number of Republicans also agree that we need to do something about where we're going relative to clean energy. We can go to the next one. Maybe this just, I think, emphasizes that a little bit, and I'll sort of shorten this up, but this basically says that 71% of the people believe that climate change exists and should be considered. Another about what is it? It's not this slide should be actually 20%, not 29. So we got about 29% in total then believe that it's a minor threat, 9% being no threat. So we talk about climate change, and it's sort of an argumentable kind of term, but when it gets right down to it, I think there's been a great big swing in the last 5 years in terms of acceptance of climate change as being something that we have to pay attention to. And if you look at the insurance experience across Minnesota, across, frankly, this world, and I won't get into it, but it strongly suggests that there's something going on here now that wasn't 10 years ago. And so that's, I think, further quantitative evidence that something's going on. So just looking again at the same poll in terms of whether people think about whether government action should be taken relative to reducing emissions like CO2, these greenhouse gases, again, you can see it's 75-25% in terms of the ratios there. So going back to the question, how green can we be, going on to the next slide, I think it would suggest that the train is on the track relative to attitude towards a green energy, a clean energy future, and decarbonizing society is something that I think is now okay to talk about without getting too, if you will, controversial or, in fact, inflamed about it, as it was several years ago. It was a topic you didn't want to talk about at Thanksgiving because it would spoil your dinner from the standpoint of differences of opinion. Just looking at, but then, okay, so then what are somewhat of the challenges? And just looking at the Minnesota power mix, and this was 2022, we're at about 28% renewable energy at this point, and our reliance on coal is at 27, or was at least 24 at nuclears, and 21 at natural gas. This doesn't change much. It's probably pretty close to that ratio even tonight as we speak. And so as we're talking about, and we'll get to this in further slides, 100% clean energy in Minnesota by 2040. And if you take the coal out, and nuclear is not included in that bill, nor is natural gas, we're talking about basically with respect to this profile, needing to fill 62% of that energy then with new clean energy, whatever it might be, solar, wind, biomass, hydro, and so on and so forth. So that's a formidable challenge to take on in 17 years, as you might just guess that these things don't happen overnight. Coal, I just might add, though, is a depleting energy resource. There's been some major changes, even in Minnesota. The power plant that Rochester gets its electricity up in Monticello, Sherco 3, is coming down in 2030. And so that will no longer power anything. Already Sherco 1 and 2 are down. We talk about, at least I do, Oak Park Heights, that plant's coming down. The stations in North Dakota that provide a lot of power into Minnesota, Coal Creek, and another one called Coyote, owned by co-op utilities out there, are coming down. And actually, if you, Coal Creek is up in north of Bismarck. I've been there twice. They're actually volunteered to give that 1,100 megawatt power plant away because it wasn't economically efficient. So that's the destiny of coal, even though it's reliable, so to speak, is not at all strong from the standpoint of its future. We can go to the next one. This is just a reflection of, again, where we get our power in Rochester through an organization called SIMPA. And again, right now, today, they're 73% fossil fuels, 27% renewables, and their goal is going to be 80% by 2030. So again, as we talk about this energy thing, you get some idea how fast change is going to have to occur to reach these goals. And so, as I often say, and that's kind of why I love to work in energy, because there is nothing, I don't think, any more public policy area that's more dynamic and changing than this world of energy. And this is just a little bit about Rochester, and Mayor Norton has reflected on this, the 100% by 2030 for our utility that serves our community. Then just going down below that, though, I just make some reference, and brief as it might be, about where Minnesota is. You might know that in the last couple of weeks, the passage of the 100% by 2040 bill was passed by the legislature. Those goals are a little bit progressive. It requires 80% by 2030. The co-ops get a little relief on that. They're going to be 60% by 2030. The cooperatives generally have been behind the so-called investor-owned utilities, the Xcels, the Minnesota Powers, the Otter Tails, and so on, in terms of their progress relative to, again, the clean energy future. But they're going to have to catch up rather quickly, because they're going to have to go from 60% in 2030 to 100% in 2040. And that's going to be obviously a pretty big jump. So we can go next. So what basically the conclusions are that, at least in my mind, the energy transition that started in Minnesota, basically, it's hard to know when, but certainly in 2007, we passed what we call the RES, Renewable Energy Standard. We are on a fast track. We're 28% now. That standard called for 25% by 2025. So we're already ahead of that, but we're on a fast track. But to get to where we need to go, obviously, given the gaps between where we are now and 100% clean energy by 2040, a lot of policy and a lot of investments are going to have to be made. So what are the challenges then? I'm going to go through these rather quickly, but certainly public will, that can't wane. Frankly, it has to grow. We talk a little bit about what the challenges are there, and there's a lot of challenges. They're attitudinal. We talk about at least an organization called MISO talks about having perhaps sporadic blackouts next summer, because again, we've taken coal offline too quickly. Hopefully that won't happen, because that will, I think, deter, again, an attitude towards moving forward. But nonetheless, we're going to have to go. We're going to have to do a lot of wind, solar, and biomass build outs, and hydro is pretty difficult to do, pretty expensive. I doubt that there'll be much of that. We've got a lot of transmission, and we're going to have rural clean energy going into urban areas. We have to get it there. There's a lot of expense to that. There's issues related to, going across people's land and so on and so forth. They're not easy. They're doable. Actually, MISO has a new line plan from the Mankato area going on into Wisconsin now, on basically kind of the north side of Rochester. That's in their plan. It's planned to be built, and that will help transmit a lot of electricity. If we're going to go to renewables, we have to think about storage, and there's a lot of technology here, whether it's, again, batteries, usually the lithium ion batteries, but more recently there's been developed what we call an iron air battery, which is a much more effective, cheaper battery than effect from the standpoint of longevity than the lithium ion battery. Actually, and it's we call it the iron air battery, and the attractive thing about that is that Minnesota is a state of iron, so it can move forward. But we need to think about these. Pump hydro, pretty expensive, probably not real applicable here. Geothermal, I think that's certainly getting more and more attractive to people, certainly in rural areas. I want to just go to skilled workers because that's really, really important. We talk about all these things, but when it gets right down to it, even today, it's hard for people that work in the solar installation area to get workers. So on that end of the spectrum, it's difficult. And more recently, I was talking with Moss Cavo, and Moss is retired now dean of the University of Minnesota Engineering Department. But Moss reflected in typical times, they would have about 240 people in their engineering program. Today, it's around 40 to 50. And without engineers going forward, in more numbers than that, it's going to be difficult to, again, do the kind of engineering, the kind of engine design, the innovation, et cetera, that takes to, again, go to this clean energies future. Manufacturing capacity is big, as under the Inflation Reduction Act. To buy some of this equipment, it need to be American made as opposed to foreign made. That's a requirement of that bill. So we're going to have to move a lot of manufacturing capacity relative to clean energy into the United States. Land use decisions are going to be a big one. And this is, again, one I want to work on across the state with respect to counties. We can't have counties doing moratoriums relative to wind and solar in particular, because obviously we're going to need a lot more wind and solar to meet these goals. And it's going to have to be, for the most part, probably in the rural areas. And then we get into whole issues about food versus fuel, in this case, electricity, and what land ought to be used for, whether it's right for a farmer having the choice of growing corn or soybeans or growing electricity, as I often say. I personally think that's a farmer's right to decide, but some counties put moratoriums on these kind of things, and if we have that kind of thing happening in a runaway sort of way, it's going to really impede the ability to meet these goals. And we just continue on to the next one. I'll go a little quicker here, but the whole nuclear debate's a big one. As you saw, about 24% of our electricity to Minnesota comes from nuclear right now. We can't build anymore by state statute, actually. And so whether we open that one up or not, there's so-called new small modular nuclear now available, which is there will be available in about 8 years. That is cleaner, safer, smaller, and certainly more affordable than a giant nuclear power plant. But as you're just looking at this thing overall affordability and reliability are going to be important. Both of those are built into the plan that the 2040 plan that was passed by the legislature. In the end, if we can't make this goals based on affordability and reliability, and or the Public Utilities Commission has an ability to extend these things. So a lot of policy and funding decisions. We can just go a little further into this at the federal level, and I think most of you know that the 10th Amendment basically gives, and this is interesting because when I go to Germany, where they have such a centralized national energy policy, we don't have a national energy policy. energy policy is effectively left up to the states. Now, having said that, obviously, I think we all know that there's been major investments in energy in recent inactions by the not inactions, actually actions by the federal Congress. One of them being the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act brings $354 million to that. That's not so much, but if you look at the Inflation Reduction Act, actually in the name of energy, it's $369 million, billion dollars with a B in a $500 billion program. So there's going to be a lot of money there. And of that money already, we know 250 million is coming to Minnesota for planning grants and 4.6 billion for implementation goals. So a lot of money. Then we just go on to the international world, and it's amazing. A couple of years ago, I was able to attend we call it IRENA. It's a international renewable energy agency, and that 156 member countries, and they come together annually and talk about all of this, and they talk about the trillions of dollars that are being spent internationally on a clean energy future. And their goals to reducing carbon dioxide are I won't go through the list, but you can see them, and they include hydrogen. I haven't mentioned that so much, but hydrogen is going to have to be, I think, an effective fuel of the future. It's got a lot of uses, and it's a powerful agent for producing energy. So what is Olmsted County doing? Again, I'm new here, but we've got the Olmsted County Waste to Energy Facility. And that, in my mind, I've been to Germany a number of times. I've never seen anything better than what we have here with respect to energy, a waste to energy facility, with respect to heating, cooling, producing electricity. As we go off the city downtown heat sink, if you will, we no longer bring steam downtown. We're going to have to figure out new ways to use that heat out there. That's going to be important. We did have, I didn't know this until yesterday, actually, a 10-acre solar facility at Haverhill Township that's owned by the county. We've got geothermal systems, both at the public works system, our department out by, I'll just say out by Fleet Farm, and we have two at Graham Park, which serve to make ice at the hockey rinks. We use white WRFs to deflect heat on our buildings. We have invested $3 million of the American Rescue Act money to groundwater protection and soil health. And this is all about cover crops and working with farmers. So that's pretty interesting. And then, of course, maybe you know or you don't know that we're pursuing a material recovery facility out next to the Olmsted County Waste and Energy Facility for pursuing a much more active recycling program here in Rochester. And then moreover, I could say, it's not in the print, it's not agreed upon, but a lot of conversation within the members here of county government about even going beyond that with respect to anaerobic digestion, and even conceivably an electrolyzer that makes hydrogen. And from that, you can either begin talking about making ammonia or making urea. You can talk about this, the char, which can go on earth and make the soil more healthy. The whole idea of moving away from the Olmsted County Waste to Energy Facilities being a garbage incinerator, really being a product factory, and using every element that exists out there to enhance its attractiveness and lessen its environmental impact. So final thoughts, just it's a complex subject. We're in the transition. The concerns about climate will drive it. Customers are demanding clean products. Just want to spend a minute on this, but not a minute, but a short while. More and more, the manufacturers, I talked a couple of years ago to General Mills, the CEO, as he was wanting to become a universal region about that. He said, Dave, you have no idea how much we spend on sustainability. The whole issue about the iron mining industry and what they're doing, no longer are the big shovels diesel. They're all electric. The big trucks are all electric. More and more, there's going to be a demand for clean steel, which is going to go all the way from building steel into the steel of making cars. And that's a consumer demand. And not unlike what we see on advertising every day with respect to the electric car movement, and that's with us, and that's not going to go away. So a lot of consumer driven demands relative to clean products are here. Again, it's going to be challenging, but we can do it. And probably as I said earlier, one of the biggest culture changes in the history of the world will be the energy transition. We relied for over 100 years on fossil fuels to drive our economy, our future, our security, our safety. Now we're going to have to change, and we will. I don't think it's any turning back. The train is on the track. So thank you so much, and look forward to any questions you might have.
Thank you, County Commissioner Dave Senjem. And we are now moving on to the question portion. The presentation is, we've had the three. Please remember to submit your questions through the chat box if you have not already done so. We will combine similar questions for time sake. And I am going to start. I'm going to go over to the questions that we've gathered. First one. I just want to pass on that Kate and her peers are continuing the Green Energy Business Program this spring, and the application is in the Green Business Newsletter. So the next question I have is there consideration for requiring local trash contractors to allow recycle only plans or to include compost organic bins? Because I think there are some people out there that have a goal of like zero garbage, creating zero garbage or close to zero garbage. And I think that's maybe Kim Norton's, or is that under Kim's? Because you had talked about that.
Yeah, I think that came up when I started, but it really is a city and county issue.
Yeah.
Dave mentioned the organic collection, and I had an opportunity to go on a zero waste circular economy trip to Sweden last year. And they have a zero waste policy there. When you have construction projects, you have to plan for zero waste. You have to reuse everything or purchase much more carefully, I think, than we do here. I do think that the city and county could work together on organics. I actually thought, Dave, in my meetings with Tony Hill after that trip to Sweden, that we would be moving that way in the next couple of years. I knew they had a contract that they had to fulfill first, but I thought when that contract came up, there was maybe going to be a movement toward compost collection so that we could try to keep all of that out of the waste stream. I will just say the county, and Dave maybe knows this or maybe doesn't, but the county in their waste to energy burner does an absolutely remarkable job. They actually dug out old waste from our dump out there and burned it to use it. I mean, we had a negative for a couple of years. We had negative waste in Olmsted County because of the work that they were doing. So we've done a lot. And again, I do think there's an overlap here with the city and county, and maybe Dave and I can, maybe take a lead on this moving ahead, because garbage, the city has to make movement on some of this, and it has to be done really with the county as a partner.
And I would just add this, and I don't know what it was like around here before November in terms of conversation, but since I've gotten here, at least, and I've talked a lot with the county administrator and to some extent with other county board members, and they may or may not be in agreement, I don't know, but I will give our county administrator a lot of credit. I came in here a couple of weeks ago on a Sunday, and in the room that the county board members kind of settle into as we do our studies or collect our mail, on the wall was this actually a beautiful piece of art depicting a whole waste energy system, all the way from the standpoint of it coming into the waste energy system to using all the byproducts of it. And it was our county administrator that had drawn that on the wall for us. So it's a very, I think, telling and effective way of allowing the conversation at least to occur, at least amongst about county board members, because that's where we go, and we can't go into that room without seeing that wall and talking about it, of course. And so I think relative to the question, as we hopefully will get into this material recovery facility, there'll be a lot more, I think, emphasis on how we recycle, what we recycle, and how we really separate our waste And hopefully we can even get into the organic digester and pardon me, not the organic, the anaerobic digester and take care of some of this, frankly, food waste and other organic waste that, you know, when we're burning food, we're basically burning water, which is not a very efficient use of electricity or natural gas or anything else. So we can be a lot better there. It's a good facility, but I know Tony and I think the collective board is interested in moving forward with making that facility all the more environmental. Frankly, we're going to have to. Facilities like this are going to come under more and more scrutiny.
And I would just add, with all the federal funding out there right now, I think the next couple of years is maybe the time we should be really looking at that and trying to get our hands on those federal funds.
Yeah. And I know the slide talked about, you know, some implementation money, planning money, but also over $4 billion for the state of Minnesota to implement some of these ideas. That's a lot of money. And in addition to that, ideas that, you know, maybe you saw the budget targets that came out yesterday, I think it was, and the Climate and Energy Committee has $255 million itself to spend on climate energy activity in Minnesota. So that is huge. That's about 7 times more than I had last year.
So I'm going to stay on garbage because there's another question. Are we looking at garbage reduction, like in the strategies and tactics? Is that one, at least in the city and maybe in the county, of reducing, you know, there's always the reduce, reuse, and recycle. Is there any strategy or tactic that we're looking at for reducing garbage?
Well, I think in the city, those 104 ideas that the community has come up with, I would not at all be surprised to see that. And someone mentioned the ban on plastic bags. Policy is a little harder to pass than strategies that are implemented. So I think there was a link actually to the document that I think Dee put in there, which I was most appreciative of. And you can take a peek. I haven't opened it for a while. Up there with the Sustainability and Resiliency Community Work Plan. But those 104 ideas are the things that will be moved forward first. We did have that plastic bag talk, but I think at the time, and that was 2 years ago before the pandemic, there wasn't interest at that time on moving ahead, although the city did ban styrofoam within the city itself. So we have taken internal steps, but there wasn't interest in taking that external policy step, at least pre-pandemic.
Okay.
And I would say from the county perspective, there anything that said, Mayor Norton pointed this out, the greater community itself seems to be more attentive to less waste. And that's in part the reason that the county a couple of years ago actually went back and dug the waste out of the landfill because they needed that fuel to accommodate the steam needs and frankly electricity to run that incinerator, and there wasn't enough. So we can always do better, but the citizens themselves, I think, are getting more conscious about this.
So another question, thank you. Rochester's green spaces are important for recreation. This comes from the audience, are important for recreation and education. And I think in the city's plan, slideshow that you had, that was part of, the community and about biking and all that bike trails, reservoir parks, what is being done to preserve these and protect them from housing and business developments?
Well, the city actually has a pretty strong position about keeping our green space. And as new developments are built, they are required to either provide a certain amount of green space per area developed, and or if it is impossible to put it on there because perhaps there's water or something else getting in the way of that they provide funds in lieu of being able to build the park for other park facilities. So the city is committed to that. The Park and Rec Department has a policy of they're working toward a 10 to 15 minute walk concept, that there is a park within a 10 to 15 minute walk from everyone in the community. And so I don't think you will see, I think you will see more parks ahead, not less, but to the point that was raised, I think it behooves this community that values our green spaces to continue to make sure that your council and county board understand the high value that places. And I do believe green space is a quality of life issue in communities, and we need to maintain it and grow it.
And I will move on to another question, unless you wanted to have any input on that, Dave.
I agree with the county or the mayor on this one, that obviously, and the county maintains, several county parks. They're not going to be sacrificed for anything that I know of, but we're adding another one out at Lake Zumbro, albeit it's more of a park that relates to the lake itself.
Okay. And I know I found some county parks during the pandemic to go out and hike in, and I appreciated that during that time. Another question that we have is, and this comes from the audience, could it be possible to have high schoolers who are interested to have field trips or summer credits for helping out building solar panels? I'll let either of you go with that. And I see Jean Marvin is on here. Not sure if that.
There was a project years ago when Jerry Williams was superintendent that actually did something like that. I don't know, I can't speak for what students are doing right now. There are certainly businesses in town that if people are interested, they could approach. I'm losing the name of the individual, Micah Johnson.
Oh, yeah. Okay, yeah.
That people could perhaps talk to about a project. He might have some interest. Dave, I don't know if the county has anything.
No, but to this question, I'm remembering a woman that walked into my office. Doesn't matter. I'll just say a dozen years ago, and she had this was for schools, for them to understand solar, and it was like solar in a suitcase. And each student would get this suitcase, and they would make that had all the parts to make a solar panel, and then they would make one, and it would be effectively work. They could plug stuff into it, and maybe a web shirt. I remember the lady was from the west side of the Twin Cities, and I think this was a national program. Maybe solar in a suitcase. If somebody did a Google search on that or something like that, it might come up. But she was actually interested in doing this in Minnesota, and I don't know that she ever did, but this kind of an idea does exist, at least in that form.
And I remember, here's a comment from one of the attendees. They said that students at Mayo High School initiated the installation of solar panels on the building.
Yeah, that's the project I was referencing when Jerry Williams was superintendent. Yeah.
And I remember that being in the paper too, but it was initiated. So another question.
Can I just add on to this? Because
absolutely.
We put a lot of solar, we call it the solar on schools. There's a lot of state money.
Yeah.
Even at the money that I'm used to, that was put towards solar in schools, and it's like schools don't know about it. They don't take advantage of it. And you almost have to, I won't say this, but almost have to beg them to do it. And of course that money is placed there by the legislature for this cause, and not only for effective, less electricity in the schools, but it's an educational tool.
And Anna, I would just say one of the other things
we need to use that.
Yeah, Dave and I both saw in Saarbeck, Germany, that they do a lot of projects for youth, where youth build toys that have solar energy, helicopter. You remember that, Dave? There were tons of projects that they did. So there's a lot of great ideas out there.
And then that gets interested at an early age and stuff. So question here, I believe that the Olmsted County Energy Commission was dissolved. But then I also get a sense that it was combined with the city. And then me as a distracted reader of news thinks, well, now the county is less committed to energy commission. And so explain what happened, because I wish I had better information on that, but I think the county energy commission is being disbanded or
the
something.
County Environment Commission and the City
Yeah.
Energy Commission. And Dave, do you want to address the county?
Sure. So this is just the way it is. I mean, it was, still is. I become a new county commissioner. One of the first things I learned is that there's a thought relative to the word was sunsetting the environmental commission. And I served on that commission in the 90s, so that wasn't a fond idea that I thought, at least. I was not certainly for that. I still am not. To the point it's going to come up on the April 4th agenda of the county board meeting, and that vote and that discussion about that vote. The idea is that we would replace it with task forces that are specific to specific issues or causes, and that's the idea. That's, we substitute that for a task force sort of approach to looking at our environmental future and causes related to that would bring subject matter experts to each of the causes and each of the task forces. Then that's not all bad either. Again, I'm suggesting my personal thoughts here. I think moving away from an environmental commission is not a good idea, but others think other ways. So that's why we have 7 members on the county board.
From the city's perspective, I mentioned earlier, we had the Energy Commission. There was actually a call placed to us from someone saying, should we combine them? But because the county is wanting to move away from it, that was kind of dismissed. But our Energy Commission will become a Sustainability and Resiliency Commission, and its charge will be to implement the 100 or help us as a city. They're not responsible for implementing, but helping us implement those 104 strategies and ideas, or 34 strategies and 104 ideas.
Okay.
So, I mean, just to your point, April 4th, the county board will consider this idea about the future of the Energy Commission, the Environmental Commission.
But there's not less commitment to the state sustainability and green energy.
Well, I don't think so. I think it's just how we what resources do we use to get there? And and how do we get there? That's what's going on here. And probably it just, I mean, I'm not there. I haven't been to an environmental commission meeting for over 20 years. I don't know a lot about what they do, but I think there's a thought among some county board members that we could be more effective with a different approach.
Okay, thank you. Last year I saw that there was a tour of the Zumbro hydroelectric dam, and I was bummed that I didn't go to it. And a attendee is asking, are there plans for more tours of the Zumbro hydroelectric dam coming up this summer? I, for one, would love it, because I'd love to go to that.
It might be something worth mentioning to the Earth Fest committee, is seeing if that could be part of what they're doing.
Okay.
They might be willing to work with the county to get that done.
Okay, because I think more people know about stuff that happens. Energy creation in the county is a good thing. I'm going to ask, let's see. So a question from our.
You should know that the city owns the dam as well as the lake.
Oh. Oh, that's owned by the city and not the county.
Yeah. If you look on the map, honestly, people don't know this. The bottom of Lake Zumbro is property of the city of Rochester.
Huh, we'll have to pressure.
Yeah, RPU is the person that gets that. Yeah, that gets that energy.
But so a question from our youth civic engagement intern. I would like to know more about the materials recovery facility. Where is it? Where this is in the process of approval and funding, and if this was covered earlier in the program before I could join. She joined later. So the materials recovery facility. Did you cover that? And I missed it too.
Well, I mean, I can go on a little further. It's going to be located. Actually, it's an extension or addition to the county incinerator facility, waste energy incinerator. So, and it's a place where, again, the recyclables will come for further separation. It's going to be, I forget how many square feet, but it's a pretty big building. Will be attached to the current building, and it's $16.5 million in terms of where it is, in terms of the ask of the state of Minnesota to help us build that. So that's kind of it in a nutshell. And we're certainly going to find out within the next month or two whether or not that money is funded. It is at 10 million in one of the bills, so that we're optimistic about that.
In the bonding bill.
Yeah.
Okay. So here's a question. It's a little bit long, but I think it is going to affect a lot of people as we electrify with cars and stuff. Part of going green will involve home electrification, which in many cases will require upgrades to home electrical service, 100 amp to 200 amp service. Are there plans for financial assistance for service upgrades, smart breaker boxes, heat pump conversions to assist people in getting their homes green? And I personally have fallen into this. We got an EV car and we got an induction oven, and all of a sudden we only had 10 amps left in our box. And so the cost is kind of a big chunk of change, I just got to say.
It is. And
So-
I will say the federal government in its IIJA or whatever, one of in the Inflation Reduction Act as well, has lots of money for projects. One of those is I'm not sure I would call them grants, but maybe that's technically the term, where individuals can actually apply for support for those things. There will be some money. We were just talking about this the other day, where they're targeting, so it won't help you necessarily, Anna, but they're going to target the census tract that have the lowest income and marginalized communities as their priority as part of the Justice 40 movement. But there will be money available for this, as well as some that'll probably trickle through or could trickle through for RPU for grants. I haven't heard yet where that's going to land. But there's individual money and then money for cities and states as well. So there's going to be lots of money out there. I think it's going to take a little bit of time for us to all dig through all those pockets of money, because there's a ton of it in the energy category, and make sure we can get it to the people in our community and notify them. I really think that communication is going to be really important so that you don't miss out as you try to deal with the electrification and certainly the EVs. I hadn't even thought of induction ovens taking that much, but yeah. David, do you have anything else?
Only, I just learned this at a national county organization meeting in Washington a couple of weeks ago, but there's certainly qualifications which I can't recite, but in terms of whether you qualify for the money, but it's $7,000 a household as part of this $369 billion energy menu within the Inflation Reduction Act. So the mayor is right. There's a lot of money here. And a little more research is going to have to be done about how it's getting out to the people, at least on an individual basis, for the reasons that you recited. Because we do want, obviously, if we're going to do these things, we're going to have geothermal. If we're going to do all these things to homes, we're going to have to upgrade the electrical service, and there's money to do that.
Good. And I'm glad to hear that there's an equity issue or lens that they're using, because we don't want a two-tier system. And also I want to point out that the more information on EarthFest, there's a link in the chat. If you want to anybody would like more information, you can click on that. And when I do this moderating, I always figure I get to ask a question. So here's my question. And it's about hot water heaters. And when hot water heaters need to be replaced, it's often in, like, oh, your hot water heater goes out overnight and you need a new one tomorrow. And when services come to, when you call around to get a new hot water heater, gas is their first choice. And because that's what they're comfortable with and what they know will work in your house. How do we, and when I'm thinking about the strategies and tactics, getting people at point of service to make that decision to go to electric versus go to gas, what they're comfortable with and what they've had. How do you implement that? How do you get that going?
They are. And also, if you wanted a tankless water heater, which I tried getting, I was definitely deterred from the people that I called to try to get that. And they argued locally it had to do with pipe size, but come to find out, all the rest of the state seems to have figured it out, but locally we've not been able to do it. So I do think maybe we should think as we move ahead about finding a way to, I don't want to say certify, because I don't mean it that maybe seriously, but just like the youth are recognizing businesses that are green, if we could recognize and note some of the folks who are in the industry who are able and willing to be able to move ahead with some of this type of thing, whether it be electrification, tankless water heaters, some of the newer technology, because I think you're right, Anna. I do think there's a comfort. We know how to do this. We can do it quickly. We have all the supplies. We have everything we need. And that transition to something new is definitely slower. So I guess that would be a suggestion, just kind of off the top of my head, but I acknowledge what you go through. I experienced it myself. And I do think it's something we're going to have to address.
And I'll send that idea on to Cate Stacy too.
There you go.
Reach out. And Dave, do you have anything to offer on that?
Not a lot, but I would expect that there will, not unlike what the incentives are within the Inflation Reduction Act and things like that. I'm going to believe that at some point in time, there'll be some sort of rebates that are directed towards electric water heaters that aren't directed towards gas, and just to drive that from an incentive point of view.
Okay. And I want to point out that there's a class that was at the community ed on incentives is being held through community ed, and the link is in the chat. So if anybody wants to click on that to find out more, and community ed offers really good classes. I'm going to look to see if there's any other questions. Let's see. Given the success of city-based e-bike rebate programs in cities like Denver at reducing car trips and the large net cost savings to utilities, public works, and public health, what are the city and county doing to incentivize the purchase and affordability of e-bikes and e-cargo bikes for residents of Olmsted County and Rochester? Yeah, which includes Rochester. Who would like to take this first?
Well, I think I can, even though I've been here only 2 months, I think I can say that as far as I know, the county is doing nothing on the e-bikes. I have it myself. I love it, but but I don't think the county is doing anything to incent that at this point, other than what the city is doing here with, bike lanes and things like that, making bike traffic, if you will, affordable, and not affordable, but certainly accommodable and safe.
I would concur with Dave. Right now, there aren't any incentives available for that. And I own an e-bike too. And it's fabulous for some of us who live at the top of a hill and can't get home without it. But there aren't any incentives, and I think that's a reasonable thing to bring up. As we move ahead, we can certainly, bring it forward to the Energy Commission to have them think about it. Is there a way, perhaps even RPU would be, they do a lot of rebates and incentive programs. Does that fall anywhere in line with RPU? I don't know if it does, but I think it's a worthy discussion moving ahead. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Good. And you know what? It's 8:24 and I'm a true believer of ending early. If that's okay.
Can I just
with
make one point? We haven't talked about it a little bit.
you. Time at the very end to make your last points, but go ahead.
No, we haven't talked about weatherization of houses. And again, we had 16 million into the bill last year, which didn't pass. But notwithstanding that, I'm sure this year's bill is going to be a lot about weatherization, much more than 16 million. Plus, if it's like other years, there's about 80 other $1 million that come into the state of Minnesota every year from the federal government for weatherization. All I'm saying in a backwards sort of way is some way to promote weatherization amongst homeowners and, if you will, the lower income areas. Is a great opportunity, but I'm not sure it's well known about, and certainly to the extent that we could make that better known amongst people that would qualify, they'd have less of an electric bill, less of a heating bill, and an overall better life. And a simple weatherization, insulation, windows, things like that.
And that's the reduced part of the reduce, reuse, and recycle. So
yeah.
I'm going to, like I said, we're going to go ahead. Most of our questions, almost all of our questions got asked. And as there is never enough time to ask all of them, I encourage anybody who still has questions, or if you think of them later tomorrow, please feel free to contact David Senjem, County Commissioner. You can find that on the Olmsted County website, or Mayor Kim Norton at the Rochester City website. And I want to thank Cate Stacy, Mayor Norton, and County Commissioner Senjem for participating tonight. And thank you for your service to the community and your work on green energy and sustainability. I want to give each of our speakers an opportunity to offer final comments, and I'll start with Mayor Norton.
I don't know that I have a whole lot else to add, other than I want to thank you all for your interest. I was really pleased to see over 30 people here at one point, that there are that many people that would pop into a web event to learn more about what we're doing in the city and county is really heartening. The other thing I would just add is you are the people that live in this community, and you have the power to keep us moving on the right track. So please make sure that your thoughts and feelings about the issues we've discussed, some of which you brought up, some of which Dave and I brought up, make sure that your city council members understand your commitment to a sustainable and resilient future. It's really, really important.
Thanks, Mayor Norton. And David Senjem.
Well, thank you so much. And I'm going to ask for a personal privilege here. And I see a name on my screen called Sabina Engel. Sabina, please open your screen. There you, well, wherever she is, maybe I don't know where she is, but for Sabina Engel and the work that she's done.
Oh, there she is. There she is.
Climate Minnesota. She is a true Minnesota champion, in my view, from the standpoint of climate, moving this energy issue forward. I would not be here tonight, but for her, from the standpoint of her work with the German government, the policy exchange programs, the climate smart municipalities, and everything else that she's done. So
didn't know you were lurking there, Sabina. Good to see you.
It's really wonderful to hear this conversation, and I'm so proud of what Rochester is doing and Olmsted County is doing. You really are taking a big leap from what the Germans taught us over the years. And it's so heartwarming to see the conversation and to see how many people are involved in this and how the community cares. So I'm super, super proud of all of the stuff that you're doing with just a couple of trips to Germany and just finding out what the Germans are doing and then running with it. I can tell you that the Germans are almost afraid to come to Minnesota because every time they come, they think, oh my God, they cooked up something else with, and it takes us in Germany so long to do this. There's something to be said for it. American ingenuity and just running with it. So very, very proud and very pleased. Thank you.
thank you, Sabina. She's, and I say this very sincerely, Sabina Engel is a true energy leader in Minnesota. And she has been and she will be in the future. But to my final comments, just I remember a cartoon I used to have on my wall. It was a Dilbert thing. It was change is good. You go first, and we're in a world of change right now, and going first is okay. Unlike what Dilbert thought, I think we have to the extent we do. I think we benefit in many other different ways, economically as well. I often say the computer was invented in Minnesota, medical device industry basically kind of invented in Minnesota. Why can't the energy innovation future be invented in Minnesota? And that's an offshoot of wind and solar and everything else that it takes to get us to a renewable energy future. If we do this, there's a lot of economic growth that can come with it by virtue of manufacturing, engineering, innovation, and things like that. We could be the center of the universe if we want to be, and I hope we are.
Thank you. And thank you all for attending tonight. And thank you to our speakers, County Commissioner Dave Senjem and Mayor Kim Norton. And I just want to let everyone know that we are having our annual membership meeting April 22nd, and we are going to have a presentation by invited legislators, senators, Minnesota senators, and representatives to give us an update of what will be happening at the state legislature at that time. Hot topics with cool leaders, and our LWV state convention is June 2nd and 3rd in New Ulm, not up in the Twin Cities. So hope people can join us for that. And I want to thank everyone for joining us tonight and learning about the local sustainability and green energy here in Rochester. Thank you. Have a good night.